Well, it's time for a very, very late Halloween review. Monster Force was a very short-lived animated series that aired in 1994. It was produced by the often overlooked Universal Animation Studio, who are mostly known for the endless Land Before Time sequels, but have also produced a lot of underrated animated series in the 90s, such as Exo Squad, Earthworm Jim, and Wing Commander Academy. Monster Force was released on DVD in 2009, but it's incomplete and only has 7 episodes on it. I never understood this mentality. The series is only 13 episodes long. If you're gonna release it, then just release the whole thing. Would it have really been that much trouble to put 6 more episodes on here? So once again, you'll have to excuse the quality of some of the footage. Don't blame me, blame whoever made this decision. The show is about a team that travels the world and fights the paranormal, which mostly consists of the classic Universal monsters. Yup, this is another attempt to create a universe around the classic monsters. How did this one go? Let's find out. Here's Monster Force. The Monster Force team is led by Reed Crowley, a scientist who's named after a famous cultist for some reason. He's a researcher at a university, which is the base for the Monster Force, and the other members consist of his students. Okay, first we had a college course on ghost busting and now one on how to fight Dracula? What university is approving these classes? And where do I sign up? The members of the team are Luke Talbot, who is a descendant of Lawrence Talbot, who was the Wolfman, and as expected, he's got werewolf powers. Trip, who's the team muscle, which seems a bit pointless, and you'll see why soon. There's Lance, the sharpshooter, and Shelly, the team psychic. Because the team psychic must always be a girl, apparently. But in addition to that, she also happens to be friends with Frankenstein, who frequently helps them out. And yes, I know it's Frankenstein's monster, but these cartoons never get that right, so whatever.
Shelly!
The Frankenstein monster!
Really? They called him Frankenstein's monster? Someone actually got it right! Granted, they do call him Frank a few times, but I guess that's just easier. So as you've probably guessed, the main villain of the show is Dracula.
It's over. You've lost, Dracula.
The name is Dracul. You should know it by now, I would think.
Fine, Dracul.
They acknowledge Dracula's real name? They're actually being accurate! And it's in this show? What the hell? Then again, this was made by Universal, so if anyone was going to get this right, it had better be them. Though there were a few things they didn't get right. The creature from the Black Lagoon shows up, and in the first episode they encounter him in, he's in the South Pacific, not the Amazon River. You know, where the Black Lagoon is. How do you get Frankenstein and Dracula right, but somehow screw up the easy one? The others are done fairly well for the most part. In the first episode with the mummy, Imhotep, he thought Shelley was the reincarnation of the princess, which is pretty similar to the original movie. No, the original movie. Thank you. There's a werewolf who's the origin of the curse put on the Talbot family, which causes conflict with Luke. But the most improved monster was probably the Bride. She was being held prisoner by a scientist who wanted to use her to create an army of monsters. It's a shame she was only in 1 episode, because I liked that she was more proactive and seemed more accepting of Frank than her movie counterpart, though her distrust in humans conflicted with Frank since he's part of the Monster Force.
Humans fear us and want to destroy our kind. We have to destroy them first.
Not all humans are bad. Most are good.
Though at this point I think I should dispense with any comparisons to the original characters and just judge the show for what it is. So Monster Force travels the world in their cool vehicles and use the latest technology to combat evil. I really want to know how a university professor is paying for all this. They've got weapons designed to stop stuff like zombies and vampires, as well as power suits called E-mechs that are brightly colored and would be perfect to make into action figures. Which they did. The suits provide them with armor and special abilities, Like Tripp's enhances his strength, and Shelly's allows her to fly. Why is she the only one that can fly? That's a very useful ability. They should all have that. Also, her helmet has a ponytail. At first I thought it was her hair poking out, but I noticed that she has very short hair. So there's no reason for the ponytail. This annoys me. Speaking of the helmets, I love how they just sort of form from nothing. Like seriously, where do they come from? Also, their designs are giving me a strong Mask vibe. In fact, a lot of this show reminds me of other stuff, like Mummies Alive. Even though that came later. Gotta review that at some point. Also, Darkstalkers. Ah! But the most obvious one is clearly Ghostbusters. Yeah, just replace ghosts with monsters and the proton packs with EMEX, and you got another version of Ghostbusters. But the main difference is because this show was so short, there wasn't any opportunity for some know-it-all parent group to come in and ruin it. We will never forget what you did, Q5. But there were a few things keeping it from elevating to the level of awesomeness of the real Ghostbusters. The obvious problem is the animation. It was really cheap. Like, this is one of the cheapest looking 90s shows I've ever seen. During the decade that gave us Batman the Animated Series, this is pathetic. It's so bad that it kind of undermines the creepy and spooky nature of the show. Not to mention the show was very inconsistent. They killed Dracula at least twice, and he kept coming back. After the first time he gets burned by the sun, he shows up again a few episodes later like nothing happened. Then it happens again in the final episode, and they assume he's really dead, but it's implied he returns at the very end, no doubt teasing a second season that never happened. Oh no, life still went on without a season 2. Also, remember when I said Tripp being the team muscle was pointless? Well, not only do they have Frank do most of the heavy work, but when Luke is in werewolf form, he's also super strong. So much so that he can help lift a giant vehicle. That makes half the team muscle. You can't have 3 tanks on your team, that's not good. You gotta balance your party. There were a few interesting things that I wish they expanded on too. They briefly established that Dracula is a wealthy and influential businessman. I wish they had done more with that. Also, they established early on that Luke hates his werewolf curse, but he seems to have control over it. Not to mention it's very useful. What's he complaining about? It's cool. More character backstory would have been nice too. The only character that gets a flashback is Shelly. It shows her seeking out someone that can help her understand her powers, and Reed was the only person that believed her, which is why she joined the team. We barely know anything about the rest of the team. Even for Reed, who's the leader. Then there were all the references. Some are a nod to the classic monsters, as well as the actors who played them. The werewolf that cursed Luke's family is named Bella, which is an obvious reference to Bela Lugosi. They're nice little references, but oftentimes they feel forced. At one point they meet a vampire hunter whose name is Stoker, as in Bram Stoker, the author of Dracula. The sloppiest one has got to be Shelley. Her full name is Shelley Frank, as in Mary Shelley, author of Frankenstein. Jeez, that's like if they rebooted the Harry Potter movies and then added in a character named James K. Rowland. Yeah, the show does feel like a big fan fiction, but there are still a lot of things to like about it. The monsters were cool. I think they did a good job reimagining the classic characters, and even made some of them like the creature more threatening than they'd usually be. Some of the episodes were pretty good too. My favorite has got to be Dark City, where they encounter a village that appears out of nowhere. They discover that the village is a living entity that appears every 100 years to feed on people. The concept alone is great, but I also love the visuals in this episode. Not to mention, people die in this! At the beginning, we see 2 people discover the town, and right when the town reveals itself to them, they fade out, and we never see those people again. They did. Very often in the show, we see them zap vampires and zombies. Yeah, they're monsters, but they were people once. I do like a show that's not afraid to take some risks. But I think the one thing that kept me invested was the team. I really like these guys. They all work well together, they have good banter, they're smart, and they use science to solve problems. While they did blast quite a few monsters, they also used non-lethal force against them as well. At first I thought it was dumb, but they established that Reed keeps many of them locked away on an island. Keeping a whole bunch of dangerous monsters locked up in one place. Spoilers, but it doesn't go very well. But the reason he does this is because he's trying to find a way to cure many of them. actually trying to find a solution through research rather than destroy them. That's pretty cool. But I think the thing I liked most about this show was nobody was incompetent. Everyone did their job, everyone pulled their weight. If there was a problem, it was due to an oversight or something unexpected, not because of some goofy comic relief character. At first I thought Lance was going to be that guy, but no, he did his thing just like everyone else. Though granted, the banter between the characters did involve a few cringeworthy jokes.
I should have listened to my mother. She wanted me to be a lawyer.
If you had, you'd be right at home in this wet, slimy, dark hole.
But my favorite was there wasn't a character that tried to be hip and cool and spew modern lingo that's going to be dated a year after this show comes out. You don't understand how good this felt, especially after the last few things I had to review. But as for the rest of the show, it's just kind of okay. Monster Force has some pretty big flaws like the cheap animation and the painfully inconsistent continuity, which is unfortunate because if its faults had been ironed out, I'd say it was very underrated. But I do feel like they were at least trying with this one. The Ghostbusters formula works well with the Universal monsters. In fact, if Universal is still going to do that Dark Universe thing, they might want to look to this for some ideas. The monsters are villains for the most part. You can't have a cinematic universe around villains. You need heroes to root for. And I think Monster Force is perfect for that, and I think it would be nice to see if they resurrect this idea in movie form. Though after 3 failed attempts in the theaters, I doubt it'll happen. As for the show, it was interesting, and it might be fun to throw on around Halloween time, but unless you're really into the Universal monsters, you can probably skip this one. So yeah, this was originally supposed to be my Halloween review, but things got a little hectic on my end. Better late than never, right? Well, now we transition into Christmas, and you know, we've had some pretty bad luck with Christmas specials on this show, but I've got a good feeling about this year.